Hey everybody, get in here. It's breaking news. The most important news you've ever seen. It's the kind of news that goes great with a beverage. Do you have a beverage? If you don't, you really oughta. Beverages are awesome. So, if you've been following Twitter or the news for the past, 5 minutes, you know that Steve Bannon just got his forever name. Yes, Steve Bannon's forever name, courtesy of the Commander-in-Chief, the Nicknamer-in-Chief, President Donald J. Trump, is, are you ready for it? Sloppy Steve. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that he used the sloppy name for Michael Moore. And Sloppy Michael Moore is a pretty good name. But Sloppy Steve, it kind of falls off the tongue a little bit better, doesn't it? I think he may have upgraded a parking place for the sloppy adjective, because Sloppy Steve just sounds better than Sloppy Michael Moore, even though it fits in both cases. Yeah, so that's the president's tweet from just a few minutes ago, is that Steve Bannon got his forever name. He worded it differently, but his new name is Sloppy Steve. Did you also see that North Korea and South Korea have agreed just tonight to have, quote, high-level talks? Now, I have already quipped on Twitter that, sure, North Korea agreed to those high-level talks, but if they insist that South Korea brings the donuts, it might be a trick. You know what I mean? Get the donuts, just tear out the back door, run across the DMZ, and you're home with a bag of sweet, sweet donuts. Kind of stuff you'll never see unless you steal it from South Korea. So I don't know if North Korea is starving yet, but I'm going to say that they're peckish. They're peckish. Not starving, but definitely they could eat. Are you starving? I could eat. But I think they're heading towards starving. So they need to get a head start on the peacemaking. And their strategy is kind of clever because it's sort of a wedge strategy. So North Korea is making nice with South Korea, trying to keep the United States out of the picture. And if South Korea says, hey, we trust these guys, let them keep their nukes, which I imagine would be the best case scenario for North Korea in terms of persuading South Korea. And then what's the United States going to do? If South Korea says, hey, we really want to deal with them while they keep their nukes, it's kind of hard for us to influence them away from that. So as a strategy, North Korea is playing it exactly right. They're buying time and they're making peace overtures, but it's the kind of peace overture that they imagine will not lead to giving up their nukes. So if you're wondering, is the leader of North Korea rational? I would say this is good news, because he's making the best play available that I can tell. I mean, I don't know what else he could do that would be better than this. You know, trying to split South Korea and the United States on their approach to North Korea. So, very good play, North Korea. Whatever happened to my hot neighbor friend? You mean my girlfriend, Christina. That's what happened. Whose side are you on? Well, when I say North Korea is playing it well, that should be taken as good news because ultimately we have, most of the power because we can literally starve them to death, and we're in the process of doing that. So your worst case scenario is that North Korea is not a rational player. So just the fact that they're making the right moves at the right time right now would lead me to believe that there's a lot of rational thought driving their decisions, which means you can deal with them. The dangerous situation would be that you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. It doesn't make any sense. It's not in their best interest, etc. But you could make a convincing argument everything that they've done recently is in fact a pretty good strategy for survival. Do you ever get anything right? You might be new here. Yeah. Dennis Rodman and a bag of donuts could go a long ways. You're loving season 2. Yes. So here's another, let's see, what would I call this? This is not a prediction. It's more about, well, it's half prediction and half preference, okay? So I haven't said this before. So those of you who are available late at night are the ones who get to hear the bonus predictions. It's sort of a half prediction. On January 20th, which I think is the 1-year anniversary of the inauguration, after January 20th of this year, it's going to be really hard to say that the economy is Obama's good economy. Because there's something in our brains about the 1-year mark, even though it's a perfectly random, unit of time. Our brains are kind of triggered by big round numbers. Reaching 100 means something even though it shouldn't. And having a year pass or 5 or 10 feels like some kind of a changing point. It feels important. So after the 1-year anniversary of President Trump, it's just going to get harder for people to respond when you say he's doing a good job with the economy. It's going to be harder and harder to say, well, that was really Obama's economy. He just inherited it. Not that things change magically at the 1-year mark, except in our minds. It just gets harder after a full year to say, well, he had nothing to do with it. Can we actually reach 5 to 7 GDP? Well, I'm not sure if anybody knows the answer to what is the optimal growth rate, because higher isn't necessarily better if it overheats the economy. But you want to grow fast enough that it justifies the deficits or justifies the tax cuts, but not so fast that you can't hire people and it becomes inflationary. So if you had to ask me where's that balance, I don't know. It's probably 5.5%, but not based on any great knowledge. I just know that 4% won't get us there. 7% would probably overheat us. So probably somewhere in that 5.5, 6 range for GDP. Weren't you just praising Bannon? Well, I've said he's very smart. I think everybody says that. Reagan grew at 8.5 for a year and a half. Well, what was the inflation rate soon after the Reagan years? Yeah, boycotting the book coming out tomorrow? I'm not big on boycotts because, I am someone who gets boycotted. So I'm not big on product boycotts. I think anybody who wants to buy it should buy it. And I think, I'm happy for Hillary Clinton that her book sold really well. I don't believe in economic boycotts among citizens. Yeah, I'm not enough of a historian to know how to compare today to the Reagan era. But inflation was dropping from the Jimmy Carter era. That's probably true. Yeah, interest rates were through the roof. Right. Does Steve regret all this? How would I know? My nose keeps itching. Um, if you haven't seen my Twitter feed tonight, there are some good laughs in there. I won't ruin it for you if you haven't seen it, but it's worth a look. Do you honestly believe Trump is smart? Well, let me put it this way. I talk in Win Bigly, my book, about how we all can have our own filter on reality, and our filters can all explain the facts we've seen. So, for example, back when President Trump was candidate Trump and he was ready to run, a lot of people said, "Well, he's a moron." And I said, "No, he's actually got tons of skills. His talent stack is crazy. The only thing about him that's crazy is his talent stack." Now, I said that since both of those theories fit what we were seeing, in other words, they both fit the observed facts, you could take examples of things that looked like they were dumb, and you could take examples of things that looked like they were smart and talented. So you could pick and choose and have any facts you wanted. So what I said was the only way you can really know is that one of those filters will predict the future better. So the filter that said he's actually smarter than you think was the one I used to predict he would win it all. So consistent with having a lot of talent, you would predict a lot of success. So I predicted that, and I was correct. And the people who said, no, he's actually just a raging clown, it's kind of harder to explain how he won it all without skill. Now, a lot of people are holding on to that belief that it was, in fact, just luck. Now, they don't use the word luck, but they say stuff like, well, he was running against the worst candidate. It implies he just got lucky. But that doesn't explain why none of the other Republicans could have beat the worst candidate in the world. So a lot of the explanations don't really hold water. Now, to the original point, somebody said here, do you really think President Trump is smart? We just saw one of the best years a president's ever had in terms of accomplishment. Great strides against ISIS, the economy. You've all seen the list by now, right? The year-end list. And even the people who were his biggest critics came around at the end of the year and said, well, we may not like his style, we might not like some of his policies, but these are the things he promised he'd do. These are the reasons he got elected. So how many years of doing exactly what he promised and exactly what his voters wanted and getting good results even for people who are not his voters, at least good results in terms of jobs and fighting ISIS and stuff. How many years does it take before you would abandon the hypothesis that it was all luck? How many times do you need to win before luck just doesn't work anymore? It just doesn't fit the facts of the past, as a coherent philosophy, because it would take so much luck that it would be amazing. So the answer is you can never rule out luck. And certainly any kind of success requires a certain amount of luck. There's a minimum you need. But I would argue that the approach that President Trump used, both as a candidate and president, as well as his skill stack, were actually really well suited for success. Yeah, Sloppy Steve. Sloppy Steve the leaker. Yeah, I think it'll get extended by some people. Newt Gingrich said that Trump is in the top 3 smartest presidents ever. That's interesting because it makes me wonder who the other ones were. I'm not sure you can judge if somebody's in the top 3 because presidents tend to be pretty crazy smart. You know, I got to think Jefferson was there. Maybe who else was he thinking of? Lincoln? Does anybody know who the other presidents were who Newt Gingrich says are in the top 3? I doubt. He said Reagan and Jefferson. You know, you could make an argument for the political skill of Reagan for sure. The wall is everything. All right, let me ask you a question. And this is sort of I'm going to make this a prediction too. So for those of you who are nice enough to stay around this long on this Periscope, here's another bonus prediction. So there's a lot of talk about whether the president will trade giving some kind of deal to the Dreamers, the DACA people, in return for funding for the wall. But here's my question. No matter whether you had funding for the wall or not, even if you had funding for the entire wall, wouldn't you build a test stretch first? And when you built it, wouldn't you pick a part of the border that maybe already had a wall, so that what you're doing is putting on a wall that works? So suppose the deal was this: all right, we'll do something for the Dreamers in return, not for funding for the entire wall, but for an upgrade to an existing walled stretch where the wall is not performing. And then we'll watch it for a year, and we'll just see if it made a difference. And then we'll make another decision about funding after we see how that went. Because I'm guessing the very best place you could put a new Trump wall is not where there is no wall, but almost certainly where there is already a wall. Because the places that already have a wall are the places that are judged the greatest risk for people going over the wall. And the whole point of putting in new walls is that the old ones are kind of porous, apparently. You can just jump right over them. So replacing a stretch of wall and calling it an upgrade might be the way that the Democrats can say, here's the genius part, hold on. This is how the Democrats can say, we did not approve the wall. All we approved was upgrading the border in the normal way that we're always upgrading it all the time under all presidents. That may not exactly be true. The Republicans can say, we got funding for the first segment of the wall, and when everybody sees how well it works, you know, it will be easy to fund the rest. So both sides can claim full victory, because Democrats can legitimately say, no, there's no new wall. All we did is say you can fix up a stretch that was already a wall. And the Republicans can say, we got the wall. Once they see how good this is, and of course you don't do all the wall at once. You have to do a part, see if the construction works, see if the company you hired is a good one, you know, make a progress payment. So I think there's room to work here. I think that there's a deal to be had. Yeah, I think there is a situation where you could build a wall and not build the wall, and both sides could claim that they got what they wanted. Now, let me give you an analogy. Analogies, as I always say, are not persuasive, but they're good for making a point of something that's sort of a new thought. Where I live, if you want to knock down an old house and build a new one, it's very expensive for the permits and the taxes to build a new construction. But it is far less expensive in terms of what you pay to the government, permits and stuff, if all you're doing is upgrading an existing house. So what people typically do here to work around that is they knock down the old house except for one wall. And then they build an entire house around that one preserved wall. And then the last thing they do is knock down that wall and replace it with a real wall. Because once the rest of the house is built, replacing that one wall is also an upgrade. So that no new house is built, it's just an upgrade from beginning to end. So I'm suggesting that the wall negotiation can go that same path, which is the Democrats can call it an upgrade and just say, all right, you can only do the part that already had a wall. Just putting a better wall isn't the worst thing in the world. And the Republicans should say, hey, we got our wall. If you don't believe it, look at it. Here's a picture of it. There's our wall. And wait till next year. We'll get some more of it. Why are we Americans paying for it? Well, I'm not sure that's the part that's the most important, but it also wouldn't surprise me if somehow we found a way to make Mexico pay for it, but that does seem like the least important part of the plan. Mexico would not pay for it. Well, they certainly wouldn't pay for an upgrade to our current wall. Maybe that's another reason to say it's an upgrade. Remittances. Yeah, there are a number of ways that we could effectively get Mexico to pay for the wall. But those things could also become a distraction. All right. I think I've said enough for tonight.